Welcome to Global Economic Landscape, Shifts and Influences. I'm your host, and today, we embark on an exciting journey of understanding that while the U.S. remains a dominant economic force, the trends strongly suggest a gradual erosion of its unchallenged influence. Monitoring these trends is crucial for understanding the future trajectory of global trade, finance, and geopolitics. The shifting global economic landscape, the dawn of a multipolar era. Introduction: From unipolarity to a world of many poles. For nearly 8 decades, the global economic and geopolitical order has been defined by a powerful symbiotic relationship, the unparalleled might of the United States economy and the dominance of the U.S. dollar as the world's primary currency. This framework, largely constructed in the aftermath of World War II, has been the bedrock of international commerce, fostering unprecedented global growth and lending a degree of stability to international markets. This era, often termed the unipolar moment, was characterized by American leadership, which shaped the rules and institutions governing the world economy. The foundations of this order were laid at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. There, delegates from 44 allied nations, seeking to avoid a repeat of the economic chaos of the interwar period, established a new system for international monetary management. This system pegged global currencies to the U.S. dollar, which was, in turn, convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. The U.S., emerging from the war with 2/3 of the world's gold reserves and an intact, booming industrial base, was the natural and undisputed anchor of this new order. The Bretton Woods Agreement also created the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, now part of the World Bank Group, institutions designed to promote exchange rate stability and finance post-war reconstruction, respectively. This architecture cemented the dollar's role, making it the world's principal reserve, transaction, and intervention currency. However, as we navigate the complexities of the 2020s, there are unmistakable signs that this long-standing paradigm is undergoing a profound transformation. The unipolar moment is giving way to a more distributed and complex multipolar system, where economic and political influence is shared among a wider array of state and regional actors. While the United States remains a formidable economic force, its relative influence is gradually eroding. This historic transition is not an overnight event but a slow, tectonic shift driven by deep-seated changes in trade, finance, and geopolitics. Understanding these multifaceted trends is no longer an academic exercise, it is an urgent necessity for businesses, investors, and policymakers who must navigate a world that is becoming fundamentally more intricate and less predictable. Part 1: The Great Reconfiguration of Global Trade. A primary indicator of the shifting global economy is the significant reconfiguration of international trade patterns, which are increasingly being drawn along geopolitical, rather than purely economic, lines. The era of hyperglobalization, characterized by a relentless pursuit of efficiency through geographically extended supply chains, is facing a powerful countercurrent. Recent data reveals a telling trend: the average geopolitical distance of trade, a measure of how closely aligned trading partners are in bodies like the UN, declined by approximately 7% between 2017 and 2024. This statistic quantifies a qualitative shift. Countries are increasingly prioritizing trade with partners who share similar geopolitical outlooks, a phenomenon often referred to as friendshoring. The U.S.-China decoupling and supply chain realignment. At the heart of this trade reconfiguration is the evolving relationship between the United States and China. For years, the two economic giants were deeply intertwined in a complex web of production and consumption. This relationship has frayed significantly, driven by strategic competition and concerns over national security and supply chain resilience. The United States has been actively working to diversify its import sources away from China, a move accelerated by tariffs imposed in recent years. On paper, U.S. manufactured goods imports from China have visibly decreased. However, this headline figure masks a more complex reality. The share of U.S. imported value added that originates in China may not have fallen as dramatically. This points to a sophisticated rerouting of trade, where products and components originally manufactured in China are being shipped through third countries before reaching American shores. Nations like Vietnam and Mexico have emerged as key intermediaries in this new trade map. Chinese companies, seeking to circumvent U.S. tariffs, are increasingly shifting final assembly stages to these countries. For example, a product might be largely produced in China, shipped to a factory in Mexico for minor finishing, and then imported into the U.S. under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, benefiting from lower or zero tariffs. This great reallocation of supply chain activity sees low-wage locations and nearshore partners gaining import share at China's direct expense. This shift represents far more than just changing numbers on a balance sheet. It signals a fundamental realignment of global economic relationships that will shape business strategies and investment opportunities for decades to come. Companies with global supply chains, from tech giants like Apple and Google to industrial manufacturers, are already feeling the profound impact. They are being forced to undertake costly and complex adjustments, reevaluating sourcing strategies, relocating production facilities, and building redundancy into their networks to mitigate geopolitical risk. The pandemic as a catalyst. The COVID-19 pandemic served as a dramatic and brutal stress test for the world's just-in-time supply chains, acting as a powerful accelerant for these pre-existing trends. The initial shock in early 2020, originating in one location, sent ripple effects across the globe, disrupting production in nearly every sector. Global trade contracted by a staggering 16% in the first 2 quarters of 2020, a shock that exceeded the initial impact of the 2008 global financial crisis. The pandemic exposed the inherent vulnerabilities of hyper-efficient, lean inventory models. Shortages of critical goods, from personal protective equipment, PPE, like medical masks to semiconductors for the automotive industry, became commonplace. The WHO estimated that 89 million medical masks were needed globally each month, a demand that existing supply chains were completely unprepared to meet. This experience drove home the importance of resilience over pure efficiency. While global trade staged a rapid recovery in 2021 and 2022, its composition and trajectory were permanently altered. The pandemic fueled a massive rotation in consumer demand from services, like travel and dining, to goods, like electronics and home improvement products, amplifying the trade rebound. As the world has since normalized and consumption patterns have shifted back towards services, the momentum in global goods trade has moderated. The lasting legacy of the pandemic, however, is a strategic shift in corporate and national policy toward building more robust, diversified, and often regionalized supply chains to withstand future shocks. Part 2: The evolving role of the U.S. dollar. Another critical dimension of the shifting global landscape is the evolving status of the U.S. dollar. For decades, the dollar has enjoyed what former French finance minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing famously termed an exorbitant privilege. As the world's preeminent reserve currency, the U.S. has been able to finance large and persistent fiscal and current account deficits at relatively low interest rates, fund a global military presence, and wield significant geopolitical influence through its control over the primary arteries of international finance. Dominance amidst gradual erosion. Despite a steady stream of predictions about its demise, the U.S. dollar remains the world's dominant currency. As of 2023, about 60% of global official foreign reserves were still held in dollars. It remains the currency of choice for invoicing international trade and settling the vast majority of global transactions. However, this dominance is no longer absolute, and the trend lines point toward a gradual but clear erosion. The dollar's share in central banks' official reserve holdings has steadily fallen from a peak of around 71 to 72% in the early 2000s to just under 58% by the end of 2024. This decline has not primarily benefited the dollar's traditional competitors like the euro, yen, or pound. While the euro's share has remained relatively stable at around 20%, the real beneficiaries have been a diverse group of non-traditional reserve currencies. These include the Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, and, increasingly, the Chinese renminbi. The yuan, added to the IMF's special drawing right, SDR, currency basket in 2016, has seen its share of global reserves grow, now accounting for a notable portion of the portfolios of countries like Russia. This diversification is happening alongside a sharp and concerning increase in U.S. net foreign liabilities, which have surged to approximately 70% of GDP by 2023. This metric, which represents the difference between the value of foreign assets owned by U.S. residents and the value of U.S. assets owned by foreigners, places the United States among the largest net debtor nations in the world, in the company of countries like Greece, Ireland, and Portugal. This growing debt position creates a long-term vulnerability, raising questions about the sustainability of the current arrangement and further challenging the perception of unassailable American economic supremacy. The push for de-dollarization. The gradual erosion of the dollar's status is not merely a passive market trend, it is being actively encouraged by strategic competitors. Countries like China and Russia, viewing the dollar's dominance as a tool of American geopolitical power, are openly working toward a de-dollarization of their economic relations. Their motivation is clear: to insulate their economies from U.S. sanctions, reduce their exposure to American monetary policy, and build an alternative financial architecture that reflects a more multipolar world. The use of financial sanctions by the U.S., particularly the freezing of Russia's central bank assets following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, has served as a wake-up call for many nations, accelerating the search for alternatives. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, recently expanded to include major energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, has made reducing dollar dependence a central and explicit goal. These efforts include promoting the use of national currencies in bilateral trade. For instance, Russia now conducts a significant portion of its trade with China in yuan and with India in rupees and rubles. While progress on creating a full-fledged alternative financial order has been slow and fraught with challenges, the direction of travel is clear. These countries remain committed to undermining the leading role of the dollar. A significant reduction in the dollar's global role would have profound consequences, limiting the effectiveness of U.S. sanctions, making it more costly for the U.S. to service its national debt, and constraining its ability to finance its defense budget and global commitments. Part 3: Geopolitical Consequences and the Rise of Middle Powers. The economic shifts in trade and finance are inextricably linked to profound geopolitical consequences. The virtuous cycle that has long supported American global influence, where economic dominance funds military might, which in turn protects the economic system, is facing new pressures. As the relative size of the U.S. economy within the global total shrinks, maintaining an expansive and costly global military presence becomes more challenging to finance. This dynamic opens the door for a more distributed and complex geopolitical landscape. A key feature of this new era is the rise of influential middle powers. Rather than being forced into a binary choice between aligning with the United States or China, many developing and emerging economies are pursuing more balanced, pragmatic, and independent foreign policies. This approach, sometimes described as multi-alignment or strategic economic hedging, allows them to maintain and cultivate beneficial economic relationships with all major powers while carefully avoiding over-reliance on any single partner. The data on trade patterns strongly supports this trend. While the geopolitical distance of trade for major powers like China, Germany, and the United States has sharply decreased, indicating a turn toward friendly partners, the same metric for many middle powers has remained stable or even increased. Countries in the ASEAN bloc, as well as giants like Brazil and India, have been deliberately strengthening their trade ties across the geopolitical spectrum. Singapore and Vietnam are masterclasses in this multi-aligned approach. They have positioned themselves as indispensable hubs for trade and investment, maintaining deep economic ties with China, the United States, Europe, and Japan simultaneously. They are active members of nearly every major regional trade agreement, including the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, maximizing their economic optionality. India has elevated strategic autonomy to a core principle of its foreign policy. It actively participates in the U.S.-led Quad security dialogue while also maintaining a long-standing strategic partnership with Russia and being a key member of the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. Brazil balances its role as a major agricultural supplier to China with its significant trade and investment links to the United States and Europe, leveraging its position as a leader within Latin America. Even traditional U.S. allies are adapting. The European Union has been pursuing a policy of strategic autonomy, aiming to enhance its own capacity to act independently on the world stage, particularly in areas like defense, technology, and economic policy. Japan, while a staunch U.S. ally, has also carved out a distinct role for itself, positioning itself as a reliable and high-quality alternative to China for infrastructure investment and development finance across Asia. These middle powers are not passive spectators in the U.S.-China competition. They are active agents shaping the contours of the new global order, adding new poles of influence and decision-making. Part 4: Institutional Transformation and the Future of Finance. The institutional architecture that has governed the global economy since the 1940s is facing unprecedented strain. The Bretton Woods system, with the IMF and World Bank at its core, is like an old operating system struggling to run the complex applications of a 21st-century multipolar world. Designed at a time when economic power was heavily concentrated in North America and Western Europe, their governance structures and priorities are increasingly seen by the Global South as outdated and unrepresentative of the current distribution of economic weight. The emergence of alternative institutions. In response to this perceived inadequacy, a new landscape of alternative and parallel institutions is emerging, primarily driven by China and other major emerging economies. These new bodies are not necessarily seeking to overthrow the existing order overnight, but rather to supplement it and create a more diverse and multipolar institutional ecosystem. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, proposed by China in 2013 and launched in 2016, is a prime example. With over 100 member states and initial capital of $100 billion, the AIIB was created to address the massive infrastructure financing gap across Asia and beyond. It is often viewed as a potential rival to the World Bank, offering a new source of development finance with different priorities and governance. Its projects span from rural road connectivity in India to energy projects in Egypt and Brazil. The New Development Bank, NDB, also known as the BRICS Bank, was established in 2015 to mobilize resources for infrastructure and sustainable development projects in BRICS member countries and other emerging economies. It explicitly aims to increase lending in local currencies to reduce reliance on the dollar. Regional financial safety nets are also gaining prominence. The Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization, CMIM, a currency swap arrangement among the ASEAN plus 3 countries, China, Japan, and South Korea, provides a regional pool of liquidity that members can tap during financial crises, reducing their immediate dependence on the IMF. The digital disruption, payments and currencies. Perhaps the most consequential and disruptive changes are occurring in the technological underpinnings of global finance, specifically in cross-border payments and digital currencies. The SWIFT, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, system, a Belgium-based cooperative that provides the messaging network for the vast majority of international payments, has long been a cornerstone of the dollar-centric financial system. However, its use as a tool for enforcing sanctions has prompted the development of alternatives. China has launched its cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, designed to facilitate and internationalize payments in the Chinese yuan. While CIPS still often uses SWIFT for messaging, it provides a separate infrastructure for clearing and settlement, a crucial step toward creating a parallel system. Even more transformative is the global race toward central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Over 100 countries, representing 95% of global GDP, are now exploring or developing a digital version of their national currency. China is at the forefront with its digital yuan, ECNY, pilot, which has already reached hundreds of millions of users. The geopolitical implications are immense. A widely adopted digital yuan, particularly if integrated into initiatives like the Belt and Road, could significantly boost the RMB's role in international trade and challenge the dollar's dominance in cross-border settlements. The development of interoperable CBDC platforms could eventually lead to the creation of parallel financial systems, allowing blocks of countries to transact directly with one another, completely bypassing the current dollar-based infrastructure. This could fundamentally rewrite the architecture of global finance within the next decade. For financial markets, these shifts signal a future of stronger cross-country transmission of financial conditions. Contrary to conventional wisdom, the United States is not the sole source of global financial spillovers. U.S. financial conditions are themselves increasingly affected by monetary policy and market developments in other major economies. This new reality requires investors to reconsider traditional assumptions about market correlations, risk diversification, and the role of U.S. Treasury bonds as the ultimate safe haven asset. Part 5: Business Impact and Navigating Future Scenarios. For business leaders and corporate strategists, these profound geopolitical and economic realignments are not abstract, long-term trends but immediate operational realities. The shifting landscape creates a complex mixture of significant challenges and new opportunities. The core tenets of global business strategy are being rewritten, with resilience, diversification, and adaptability becoming the new watchwords. Supply chains are being fundamentally reconfigured to reduce dependence on any single country and to withstand potential disruptions. New markets are opening up as economic gravity shifts, while traditional markets may become subject to new political risks. Companies must now incorporate sophisticated geopolitical risk analysis into their core decision-making processes. Key strategies for navigating this new era include supply chain diversification, moving from a just-in-time to a just-in-case model by building redundancy, diversifying sourcing across different geopolitical regions, China Plus One strategies, and exploring nearshoring to bring production closer to end markets. Financial resilience, hedging against currency volatility in a world with multiple significant currency blocks and preparing for a financial environment where capital flows may be more fragmented and borrowing costs more varied. Geopolitical acumen, developing an in-house capacity to monitor and analyze shifting geopolitical dynamics, understanding how trade policies, sanctions, and international relations can impact market access and operational continuity. Looking ahead to 2026 and beyond, the interplay of these powerful trends could lead the global economy down several distinct paths. Baseline scenario: a fragmenting world. In this scenario, the current trends continue. The U.S. economy may experience modest growth of around 1.5% in 2026. Trade tensions persist, with tariffs remaining elevated. The Federal Reserve engages in a slow, cautious cycle of rate cuts. The world continues to slowly cleave into distinct geopolitical and economic blocks, with trade and technology decoupling accelerating. Global growth is sluggish, hampered by friction and uncertainty. Upside scenario: a new globalization. A more optimistic path could emerge if major powers find new avenues for cooperation, potentially driven by shared challenges like climate change or future pandemics. This scenario would see a wave of new, modernized trade agreements finalized and a de-escalation of tariff wars. The result would be a resurgence in business investment and cross-border collaboration, leading to stronger global growth driven by both business investment and renewed consumer confidence. Downside scenario: geopolitical recession. This perilous scenario could be triggered by a major geopolitical crisis, such as a conflict over Taiwan, or a severe financial shock, perhaps stemming from turmoil in the U.S. bond market or an uncontrolled sovereign debt crisis. This would likely lead to a sharp increase in protectionism, severe financial market volatility, and austere fiscal policies in major economies, pushing the U.S. and the wider world into a deep and prolonged recession with significant negative spillover effects across the globe. Conclusion: embracing the multipolar economic order. The cumulative weight of the evidence is compelling and clear. While the United States remains the single most powerful economic actor on the global stage, its relative position is in decline. The unipolar moment has passed, and we are moving inexorably toward a system with multiple centers of economic gravity, a truly multipolar world order. This historic transition will not be seamless. It will likely be marked by periods of heightened competition and instability as global institutions, long-standing norms, and power relationships are renegotiated and adjusted. We can anticipate increased rivalry for influence within international bodies like the IMF and World Bank, continued shifts in currency usage for international trade, and the further consolidation of regional economic blocs, each potentially with its own distinct rules, standards, and technological platforms. However, multipolarity does not necessarily mean a world of constant conflict. It will also necessitate new forms of cooperation to manage the shared challenges that no single nation can solve alone, from climate change and pandemic preparedness to global financial stability. Monitoring these unfolding trends is of paramount importance for understanding the future trajectory of global trade, finance, and geopolitics. For businesses, the key to success will be agility and foresight. Those that recognize these shifts early and adapt their strategies accordingly will be best positioned to thrive in a more complex world. For investors, a fundamental reassessment of portfolio allocations is required, with a keen eye toward the changing global economic balance and the emergence of new growth centers. For policymakers, the challenge is to develop national strategies that acknowledge this new multipolar reality, fostering competitiveness while simultaneously seeking avenues for constructive international engagement. We are all living through a pivotal moment of transition, one that will define the global economic order and shape our collective future for decades to come. On our next podcast in episode 17, we will conclude with the second installment from episode 15 entitled Billions of Brains, the Global AGI Invasion in Your Pocket, where we embarked on an exciting journey of understanding and preparing for the AI landscape, which is undergoing its own seismic shift. A wave of new language models flooded the market, each promising to push AGI closer to reality. So be sure to catch us next time, for Reggie and Royal Perspectives podcast on the economy, cryptocurrency, history, and business. If you enjoyed the podcast, don't forget to smash the like button, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, let's stay busy.